Hello everyone. Herzlich willkommen zur neuesten Folge der Very British Actually Book Corner. Für alle, die mich noch nicht kennen, mein Name ist Andrea, kurz auf Ria, und ich bin angehende Kultur- und Reisejournalistin mit Schwerpunkt Großbritannien. Auf meiner Facebook-Seite Very British Actually teile ich Wissenswertes und Schönes über British Culture, Travel, TV-Show, Books, Films and more. Da ich seit einiger Zeit auch in London lebe, teile ich auch immer mal wieder Insider-Tipps, die ich hier als Local in der UK so entdecke. Büchern räume ich in meiner Book Corner inzwischen einen ganz besonderen Platz ein. Und ich stelle euch hier tolle britische Autoren im Gespräch vor, die in Großbritannien schon enorm erfolgreich sind, in Deutschland allerdings größtenteils noch echte Geheimtipps sind. Mein heutiger Gast in der Book Corner ist die englische Romanautorin Victoria Scott, deren Debüt Patience seit dem 1. August in Deutschland auch unter dem Titel Besonders glücklich, jede Familie ist außergewöhnlich erhältlich ist. In unserem Gespräch erzählt Victoria mehr über sich und ihre Schriftstellerkarriere. Außerdem verrät sie auch, welche persönliche Inspiration hinter der bewegenden Familiengeschichte ihres Romans steckt und wie es ihr gelungen ist, ihre Charaktere so authentisch darzustellen. Darüber hinaus plaudern wir auch über die Wahl ihrer Schauplätze und welchen Einfluss die Klassenzugehörigkeit nach wie vor in der britischen Gesellschaft hat. Und damit herzlich willkommen in der Very British Actually Book Corner, Victoria Scott. It's a real pleasure to have you, so welcome.
Thank you.
So for the German audience to know, you've written 2 books so far. One is called Patience and the other one is called Grace. And your debut, Patience, is available in German under the title Besonders Glücklich, Jede Familie ist außergewöhnlich, since the 1st of August.
That's exactly right, and I'm glad you read that and not me, because my German accent is quite poor. I did do German at school, but it was a very long time ago, and I haven't practiced it for about 20 years.
Okay. Glad to do that.
So, yeah, I have written 2 books. In fact, the English versions are just behind me. So, this is what they look like in the UK. This is Patience, my first one. And this is my new one, which is Grace. And Patience has just been, as you say, translated into German by Alexandra Kranefeld, who is bilingual in English and German, and she's done a really good job.
Brilliant. So you're happy with brilliant. So before we dive into the story itself, I thought that it would be nice if you can just quickly give the audience a bit of an overview about your writing career today, which I started in journalism. So I think most people might be quite keen to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, it started when I was about 4 with like a pen and a piece of paper in my bedroom, but I did an English degree, an English literature and language degree in London. And then I just always wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a journalist since I was a kid. You know, I'm listening to the radio and watching the TV, wanting to be the people I heard and saw. So I did a postgraduate diploma in broadcast journalism and went to work for Reuters and then to the BBC. And I worked in TV news production mostly. I did a very brief stint, like overnight, presenting on screen. But mostly, I mean, they only let me on in the middle of the night. And the rest of the time it was production. So behind the scenes, but writing, editing, interviewing and making bookings for guests. And so I did that for quite a long time. And then I ended up moving to Qatar in the Middle East in the financial crisis of 2008.
Oh.
It was my husband's job that took us there. And that was a really interesting place to live. And in fact, Qatar makes a brief appearance in Besonders Glücklich. So my experience was pretty interesting. I did some good journalism out there. I had a column about expat life in the Telegraph, and I also worked for Time Out, the events magazine, doing like restaurant reviews, and which was quite nice. I got some nice food.
Nice.
And nowadays, fast forward to now, I live near London. I teach journalism at Kingston University. And in my spare time, I now write novels. I started Patience probably, I don't know, it was probably at least 10 years before it was published, and it was published last year. So it was a long time ago. And a bit like a lot of authors take a long time to write their first book, and it goes through various versions, and it takes you a long time to finish it. I did a Faber Academy course, which is a creative writing course for the Faber Publishing Group, when I was just about as a 40th birthday present, actually.
Nice.
And that really encouraged me. And I finished the first draft of Patience, sent it off, and I got 2 agents offer me representation in the end, and I accepted the best. I felt the best of me, the one I really clicked with. And Patience sold, as I say, in German and also UK and Commonwealth. And it was the in the UK, it was the Booksellers Association Book of the month it was launched, which for me was a huge thing, because the one before that was China Room by Sanju Sahota, which got a Booker nomination, and Sarah Women's Still Life was the one before that, and they're both amazing writers. So to be in that group was just amazing. And now I'm just busy writing. I mean, I still teach university, but I've just sent the draft in of my 3rd novel to my publishers. So crossing my fingers.
Brilliant. But I think it's well deserved, because I raced through the book when I read it, and it's really one of my favorite books I've read so far in this year. So I really see why people gave you that kind of recognition, because it's a moving story. And so I think we can now kind of move on to go more into Patience, or the German title Besonders Glücklich, because it's such an extraordinary story. First of all, because what I really love about it is you really look at the family from all perspectives. So you give every family member a voice, and then especially Patience, who has this very special condition with a Rett syndrome. And I love the fact that you gave her the first person perspective, where everybody else is talking in third person, but her voice really shone through. So it was really, it was really special.
I'm so glad. I mean, what happened was, well, I'll start from the very beginning. The book was inspired by my sister Claire, who has something called Rett syndrome, as you say. It's a very severe genetic disability which affects mainly girls, very few boys, and she's had it since she was born, but it only really became obvious when she was about a year old. She's still alive. She's now 42. But she is severely disabled. She needs help with everything, and she's never been able to communicate with us. But in recent years, it's been shown that people with Rett, particularly when they're young, are actually able to use eye gaze technology, where they can control a computer with their eyes and communicate. And so that whole thing got me thinking about Claire and what she might actually be thinking. And Patience is really how I imagine my sister to be. And the first person voice, which I very rarely use when I'm writing, sprang out for her. She came out fully formed, landed on the page, and told me who she was. You know, It was one of those moments. It was absolutely amazing. And I loved her, and I loved writing her. And I got to the end of the book and I thought, oh my God, I basically spent the whole book getting to know my sister. And I felt I understood her much better after, and family members have said the same. And so the book is about gene therapy also, and it might sound like a science fiction kind of thing, and it slightly is, in that it has started to be used now for certain disabilities. Gene therapy is quite amazing. Essentially, scientists are now able to fix faults in faulty genes. And Rett syndrome, I know, and a mouse model, and it is only a mouse model, has achieved this for Rett. But there are human trials of gene therapy for Rett kicking off around the world right now. And I wrote this book when that was still a possibility, but it hadn't yet become real. But I wrote it as if it was real. And what happens in the book is, as you say, you get the perspective of the mum, the dad, Patience, and her sister Eliza, and they are both grown up at this point. Her sister's 30. So they're grown-up parents. They're still caring for their daughter, even though she should have left home long ago. And they are given this possibility of this trial for gene therapy. And what you get is, you get one side, the mother, who is really keen to enroll Patience, and the other side, the dad, who really doesn't, for very valid reasons. And then you get Patience, who no one knows, understands, and so nobody explains anything to her. And she spends a lot of her time just kind of going, what? Kind of, what on earth's going on? And she's really funny and sweary and rude.
Yes.
And I like that about her. So she watches everyone and says, hang on a sec, no, or whatever. And she observes her sister, who, I went through that experience myself. I'm the sibling of a severely disabled person, and I had no other siblings. So I went through that experience, and I know that it can feel very lonely and very scary. And as you become an adult, you are still sort of there thinking, you've still got your parents to worry about, because they're looking after your sister and she's not very well. And she might become, even more ill, because Claire's always been up and down, and Patience is similar. So I kind of wanted the whole family experience of caring to be in there. I don't think people talk about it very much, certainly not enough. And how much people, how much unpaid caring families do, because they love that person, but also the very real impact that has on their lives. So the mother in particular, because the father has to work away for money, the mother Louise is left looking after her severely disabled adult daughter all the time, and she doesn't really have any other focus or life. And that's a huge thing. So I wanted that to be there, to be clear for people to read that. But it sounds quite depressing, doesn't it? But it's not a depressing book.
Not at all.
It's quite funny, and Patience in particular is quite funny. She's a big Take That fan, which is my obsession. I'm a Take That fan.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that.
In fact, I once got a bus all the way from England to Germany to see Take That perform.
Wow.
In Berlin. I can't remember where it was, but I remember there was a tour organised, because they'd done a UK tour and they went to Germany, and they took a whole load of fans over in coaches, and I went, aged about 16. I was that mad and that crazed. So I put that in the book because I just wanted to, because I threw a lot of things into this book that are me. This book is not me, but there are elements of the book that are about me. I think you write what you know. So the Take That fan thing is me. And so I gave that to my sister, who actually is more of a fan of Kylie Minogue, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, but yeah, Take That. And I wanted to show, because music has always brought my sister alive.
Right.
And I wanted to show how important that is, particularly with profound disability, that in fact music can get in when other things can't.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, but like we said, the book is very uplifting. So I think that is something that I really need to stress out as well. Because I think
people kind of think, oh, this is going to be depressing.
Yeah.
And my books always have hopeful endings. That's just me. I'm a hopeful ending sort of person. I don't like sad films, and I don't like feeling sad. So I write things that have real angst in them, real problems. I'm not pretending that life is easy. But again, I think there's a lot of hope in life, and love and family relationships are so amazing, and the power of love from your family, from your friends, not just kind of romantic love, is something that goes through my books. There's a thread that runs through. And with Patience, I think I also just wanted people to see people like my sister more physically, to see them.
Yeah.
So that when they look at them in the street, if they pass them, and they might normally sort of shy away and look in a different direction, I want them to go, oh yeah, maybe there's something going on in there that I hadn't thought. And that acknowledgement of that person's humanity. is really important to me. And so in writing the book, I wanted them to feel Patience's itch that she wanted to scratch, the pain that she can't communicate, the frustration she feels when they won't explain what medical procedures they're going to do. So the fear, the discomfort, the frustration. And also the other thing I wanted to capture was the amazing relationship she has with her sister and her parents, even though none of them have spoken to each other. And it's an unspoken communication that I think most people who've had children will understand. When they're a baby and they haven't got language yet, you do still understand them. And with Claire, we sort of understand her, the way that she moves, perhaps her facial expressions, the look in her eye. I used to share a bedroom with her as kids, and I would sort of whisper stuff to her in the evenings and things, all my secrets and things. And that's very much a thing. So when I wrote from these 4 perspectives, and that's the other thing, when you're at creative writing school, you're always told you not to have too many points of view, like maybe you have like 3. And I wrote 4 into this book, kind of defiantly. I was like, I want both parents and both children. And that was, for me, that was the whole point, is I wanted you to see the story from all of those perspectives. And the story moves along with each chapter, so you're not kind of keeping going over the same ground. But you do gradually get to see the motivations behind each of them. And I think that's really important, because Louise, for example, the mother, I think some people might feel that she's kind of annoying. And, the doctors find her a bit annoying and things like that. And she's a very passionate woman. But then you get into it and you discover, the immense pain and guilt and things that are driving who she is. And so I think being able to tell it from her perspective and not just from the girls was important for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really thought, for me, it's this kind of full understanding of what this impact had for the family, to actually see, first of all, the mother, who was very, very keen, and she didn't even thought about not enrolling her daughter for this gene therapy trial. She just said, yeah, this is an opportunity. I want to give my daughter a better life. And you can really see that from her perspective. But then on the other hand, you see the father, who really doesn't want his daughter to be harmed by it, because he looks at the side effects and then he thinks, well, she's quite comfortable the way she is. And as you said, he is mostly abroad, so he's not the full-time carer like Louise. So for him, he looks at it at a completely different perspective. But
he's not got the daily burden and the daily impact on his life. And just like us, actually, with Claire is just who she is. We've never wanted her to be anything else. We accept her for who she is. I think the whole idea that someone needs to be cured of something can be incredibly insulting. Just because someone's disabled doesn't make them any, they're just another version of normal. There is no such thing as normal, etc. Every family is extraordinary, and that's translated into German, isn't it?
Exactly.
So that's absolutely true. But having said that, you've got Louise's point of view, and I completely can see, she's borne that weight her whole life, and she's accused by Pete of, being selfish in her desires to help patients get well. And you can see that, and you can sort of see that as well. And you think, is she doing it for herself and not for her daughter? But then equally, she's seen how much pain her daughter's been in so many times, and she is given this opportunity to potentially have all of the nightmare that she's been living and the family have been living, and that grief they went through when they realized their daughter wasn't going to develop normally, kind of reversed, or so she's kind of told. And so I kind of approached gene therapy with a really open mind, actually. When I wrote this book, I hope that you feel that I don't know if I came down on either side. Personally, I'm not sure. If we were given that option with Claire, I don't know what we do, because it's especially at this stage, very risky. The early trials, all sorts of things can go wrong. The side effects list is huge. And if it starts to work and it works routinely and there are solutions to problems, then okay. But there are potentially issues with things like the brain. Their skulls are quite small because the brain hasn't grown, and so if the brain starts growing, then you might need skull surgery. There are the risk of cancerous tumors, heart problems. There's all sorts of stuff that can go wrong. It's experimental in the extreme, and so I don't blame Pete, her dad, for being the way he was, and so I hope by giving, quite clearly, I deliberately gave the parents a different point of view, because in a book, conflict and then it resolves itself, and that's all part of the plotting device. But equally, I can imagine lots of families actually in real life having this argument, having this conversation, and different members of the family having a different point of view. And also nowadays there are hopefully a whole generation of young rep women coming through who might even be able to say yes or no for themselves. But Claire has never managed the technology, the eye gaze, and so we don't really know why that is, but we'd have to make the decision on her behalf still. But again, there's that whole informed consent thing, and in the book there's a medical procedure, and I won't spoil her or anything, but there's a medical procedure that isn't explained to her, and the fear that she feels. And I've often thought that about my sister in hospital, sort of trying to stick a line in or whatever into her hand, and the pain and just the discomfort and where am I and what is going on is very real. And so yes, I wanted to put all of that in, and I think I did, but hopefully I wrote also a really interesting book that people enjoy, that makes people feel and think, and also makes them smile. It does have, as you say, a hopeful, uplifting ending.
Yes, and I have to say, the book made me equally laugh, and also, I shed a couple of tears. So I think that was just the way it's supposed to be. But
that's life, right?
Exactly.
That's also life. That's how it is in our family. There's lots of laughter, and occasionally, it's blooming awful, and that's how life goes, and certainly life with Claire goes. There's been a lot of laughter over the years and some tears. Yeah.
No, but I think it was brilliant. What I also really like, because as you said, you have these 4 perspectives. The book is also divided in 4 parts. So we kind of follow the family over the course of 1 year. And then we have, in every part of these 4 parts, we have a different stage where the family is, and how the conflict kind of go through, and then in the end there will be a resolution that I think people will be quite happy with, because I thought the ending was just brilliant. I loved it. I was just
thank you. I'm so glad. It had a slightly different ending initially. These things kind of go through phases. It always had a happy ending, or a sort of hopeful ending, but initially it didn't end on a patient's chapter, and my brilliant agent Hannah said, "You began with her, you must finish with her." And I went, yeah, okay, you're right there. So I had to sit down and came up with the ending, which I think does work. That's one thing about publishing, is you learn, is it's really it's group effort. It's a team effort, and a really good agent and a really good editor can really kind of add something. But they were so supportive at every stage of what I wanted to do, the vision I had, and the cover in the UK has a woman in a wheelchair in it. So it's got the family members, and one of them here is in a wheelchair, and for me that was pretty important, because disability isn't really acknowledged or talked about, particularly physical disabilities. There are quite a few novels that feature things like autism, but very few that feature the kind of extensive disability that my sister has. So that was important to me as well, and I was so pleased with the result, and it was my debut as well. So it was all kind of a dream, from writing to actually the very first book I wrote, getting a publishing deal, ending up in the shops. It was pretty amazing. Yeah.
I can imagine. Usually lots of authors would say that they write one book and then they develop from there. So this is really I think also telling how important the book was for you to just have it.
It was very much something that came from the heart, came from my soul, was the book of my soul. And I really meant it, and there's so much truth in there, my truth, my own experience of my life, and so much about Claire. But having said that, having written now 2 more novels, I was nervous with my second one, which came out a month ago in the UK, that it wouldn't be loved as much because it didn't have that kind of personal aspect to it. But oddly enough, it's doing really well, and people love it, and they say the same things, that the characters feel real, that they love the ending, that they like the story. And I think, as much as it was a really special story, I think I can put it to one side almost and say, I've done it, and that's out in the world and it's spreading, but I've got other stories I want to tell as well. So I'm not just a one-trick pony, is what I'm probably saying. So the second one's about adoption, and that was inspired by a friend of mine who adopted a baby, and then the baby eventually went back to the birth mother through the courts, and it was a horrible process. But I wrote that, and I really felt those characters, and I really felt the story, and it's really landing well with readers. So I feel, as I say, that I'm like, I think it validated me as an author. The first book felt like so much of me. I thought, maybe I can't do this again. And I've written another one, and people do love it too. So I obviously can, and that's a relief. Yeah.
But I think there's also another element, because obviously the personal experience that really shines through, especially if I look at the relationship between Eliza and Patience in your book. But what I've also heard, and I just want to confirm that with you, is that you interviewed people as well to get information on making it, because I have to say the book felt so authentic, and I was very curious about how you did that. And yeah, so I thought you probably used your journalism skills for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's I approached my books in the same way. So I research, I ask lots of questions. I interviewed my own mum because there's only 18 months between me and my sister, and I don't remember those early years, and I wanted to know how it was when she had this baby who wasn't quite right, who the doctors were saying, she'll be all right, don't worry about it, and gradually the penny dropped, and Mum really had to push, and she had to take her, and she ended up at Great Ormond Street, which is the famous children's hospital in central London, where eventually somebody gave her a diagnosis. But there's a scene which is a sort of a flashback to the 1980s, where Louise is in London with Patience, and she's been in Great Ormond Street for a week, and no one has been able to give her an answer. And that is my mum's own experience. And my mum did actually go to this end of the week, we haven't got any idea what's wrong with these kids kind of presentation thing, where she sat with my sister on her lap, and these doctors on the front were having this conversation. And eventually someone pipes up and says, I think I read something about this thing in Austria, because Andreas Reck was Austrian. And so that was straight out of my mum's own experience, and she let me use all of that. And the fact that when she was staying in the hospital, there wasn't anywhere for her to stay, so she and this other woman sort of made a room out of an office and stuck a sheet up at a window. And back in those days, they didn't really look after their parents at all. So there's a lot that's real in there, but it's not all my own experience at all, but it's lots of other people's. I also interviewed an amazing woman who was the chairman of the Royal College of Paediatrics in the UK, called Hilary Cass, who knows everything there is to know really about Rett syndrome, so that I could get as much kind of proper info. I mean, I know about my sister's disability, but I wanted to get those sort of medical details right. And I also spoke to a geneticist about how gene therapy would be administered, how it might play out, what the risks were. Read quite a lot of books. I read quite a lot of scientific papers, which was complicated because I'm not a scientist. And so I could try and make it accurate, but not complicated and off-putting. So I mean, I'm not writing a medical textbook, but I did want to try and make it as realistic as possible. So I did all of that. Yeah, I stuck all of my sort of journalistic skills into it. I did the same with book 2. With book 2, I spoke to a family court judge at length, spoke to social workers, spoke to people who've been in care, spoke to people who adopted, because I wanted to get those voices in to make them as authentic as possible.
Yeah, that really is shining through your book. So I'm
glad. I mean, but that's my instinct, I ask questions. That's my job. and if I don't know the answer, I'll try and find it out. And so it's worked out for me, because I want to write books about issues, things that bother me, things that seem to me unfair, things that make me think. And the third novel, which hasn't been announced yet, but it is set in a rural part of the UK where I grew up, and it's about rural poverty and about the lack of affordable housing and the impact of that. And again, that's just something that really bothers me, and that I wanted to explore. And so I wrote from the heart. I did lots of research, spoke to all sorts of people, and yeah, I'm sort of, and I've even got a book 4 planned. And that one thus far is going to be set in London. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
But we'll see how that one comes on. I'm planning it right now.
So there's just one little thing that I would be interested in. So your story is set in different locations in the UK. So we have Eliza, who lives in London. Then her dad, Pete, he's originally from Birmingham. And the area they are living in is Oxfordshire. Is that did I get that correctly? So is that did you choose those locations deliberately, or was that just
Well, they were fairly deliberate. I used to live in Battersea in South London in a flat very similar to the one Eliza lives in. And in fact, that scene, the very first scene you see where she comes home to this flat and her boyfriend's just moved out, that did happen to me.
Oh my God.
And I did sit there on the sofa with like half the furniture missing and just think, oh, what on earth am I going to do now? So that did happen. That's straight out of my life. That was one of the first scenes I wrote, actually. It was very kind of cathartic. But Oxfordshire, I lived there briefly. My husband, he's a pilot. He learnt to fly there. And so we lived in Oxfordshire. And so Birmingham, I grew up in Worcestershire, just south Birmingham. Used to go to Birmingham at the weekends and stuff. So I knew the areas quite well. And I think that's quite important when you write about them, just so that you can really give a flavour of those places. And also, they're all fairly close to each other. So, you know, people can get in a car and get somewhere within an hour, which from a sort of a logistical point of view, when you're writing about people going to see each other, is also quite important. But I did write about suburbia. They live in, a very boring area of Oxfordshire. It's not like beautiful Cotswolds, it is suburbia, and that's because I read a book and I read an article which said not enough novels were set in suburbia, and I thought, right,
I'm on it.
Why not? And I just thought I wanted them to be an average family in an average street, nothing special. I didn't want them to be really wealthy. I wanted them to be relatable, ordinary people.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think it also made the kind of conflict that also is in the story between Pete's working class background and then Louise's middle class background. So that's I would say that the whole class system is something that Germans are not so much used to, even though we do have it. But I think in the UK, it's much more important to have these classes. So
really nice. It wouldn't it if we didn't have them, but we do. They're a thing, and it causes a lot of people a lot of upset. And in the book you have Pete, who is very firmly working class. Although having said that, his family own a firm, a construction firm, and they're making decent money. But when he's young, he doesn't have much in particular. And then he marries this woman whose dad is a priest. And in the UK, that kind of confers a certain status. They'll have lived in quite a nice vicarage somewhere, a nice building near a church, and certainly not a sort of modern church either. So this would have been sort of 60s, 70s, with very antiquated views about things, and that sort of clash between his slightly rough Birmingham working class lad edges and Louise's more prim, well-to-do, Morty Vicar kind of grit childhood. That's in contrast, and that's deliberate, of course, as well, because I wanted there to be some kind of conflict between them. It just makes it more interesting for everyone. When you were writing a book, you know, you can't just have, you know, and everyone lived happily ever after, and you know, or whatever, because that's not how life is either. We've all got hang-ups and little things that we have a problem with, and one of the things, unfortunately, that still gets people going in the UK is class and perceptions of class. And it's not really about money either. It's about, I don't know, something completely nebulous, something that you can't even put your finger on, like, you know, the way you speak, or the things you like to do in your free time, the kind of beer you drink. It's that basic, and it can last forever. And people do have, there's the expression we use, is the chip on your shoulder, and people do have chips on their shoulders.
Yeah, but I think that is, this whole kind of experience is something that my readers probably will, the audience here will enjoy a lot. Just get this whole culture insight, but also this kind of extraordinary circumstances that this family lives through. So I think,
I hope so. And also, despite the fact they're obviously very British, hopefully just that universal experience of being a family and dealing with family problems, you know, and we all, I mean, it doesn't matter what culture we come from, you know, love each other and deal with ill health and all that sort of thing. And I think it's fairly universal, really.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you so much for coming into the book corner, Victoria. It was really lovely to have you.
My pleasure. I do like your British phone boxes, by the way.
Thank you.
Multicolored as well. Brilliant. I mean, we don't have so many of those now, and they're such a shame. They were perfect when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, for like sheltering in when it rained.
Yes. Imagine. Perfect hiding place.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, brilliant. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop all the relevant links in the description below of this video, so people can find your books, find your website. Also, you're on Twitter.
I am. I'm Tori Scott. That's TORYSCOTT on Twitter.
Yes. So, and I think that would be also a great place for people to connect with you. And so, yeah, so everybody who's been not having the pleasure yet to read this lovely book, Patience or Besonders Glücklich, Jede Familie, Außergewöhnlich, is available in Germany, and it's published by Knauer. So yeah, do buy it, and it's definitely worth reading. All right, thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone.
Bye.